Okay, let's continue on in our self-forgiveness list for fear. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to teach my children the same fears that exist within me, so that they may live in fear as I live in fear, as the rest of the world live in fear. Wow. Let me tell you that this list, self-forgiveness list for fear, I found in a website which I will link at the left side of this video. And the person who used this list was able to go in and out the dimensions and find out what's going on in a place called heaven. Okay, so I thought I'd experiment and see how it affects me, or what my reality is after I read this. Okay, so I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that I need and require to live in fear to protect me and be safe. Thus, I must teach my children fear so that they may be safe and protected. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that fear will protect me and keep me safe from harm. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear harm. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear being harmed. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear that something might happen to my children. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to live with the fear of what if something would happen to my children. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to believe that if I don't have fear, I am not safe and protected. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to fear shame. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to fear being ashamed of myself. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to fear regret. I forgive myself that I have allowed myself to fear experiencing regret. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear guilt. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear experiencing guilt. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear overeating. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear starving to death. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear experiencing starvation. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear the pain of starving to death. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear dying through drowning. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear the pain of dying of drowning. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear spiders. I forgive myself that I've allowed myself to fear sharks. Okay, let's move on to the next one.